All right. So there's all different types of astrology. The one I use is evolutionary astrology, which focuses mostly on, well, it focuses on everything, but the big thing is the south node and the north node of the moon. What this kind of indicates is kind of like this is where, I don't know what you believe in. I know you said you did like the Asatru stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but this is like past lives, kind of like the theory is like this is a past life and kind of like the karma you carried over and kind of things that you need to get away with, bad habits that you come in the world with, um, things like that. And kind of you need to go strive to the north node, which is things that don't feel familiar, things that are kind of uncomfortable, but kind of things that you need to do to fulfill your soul and your destiny in this lifetime. Some people don't take it that way. Like I have one guy who does this who's Christian. He just kind of sees it as like real bad, nasty habits you need to get away from and things that you need to go towards that feel weird and familiar.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. We'll start off with your sun. Like you said, you're a Virgo sun. It is right there on the cusp of the ascendant. I'm sure you heard of like your Virgo rising this or Virgo ascendant. So the sun, the moon, and the ascendant are kind of the primal triad, the big three in astrology. Like most people only know their sun sign, but there's a small percentage that know all three of those. But of course,
Mm-hmm.
you got all this stuff going on. So Virgo sun, you have it right on the cusp of the ascendant, which the ascendant is just the cusp of the first house. And the house system I use is called Placidus. So it's kind of uneven. You can see like the cusp of the sign are like all different
Yeah.
areas kind of overlapping. These are the signs. That's Virgo, that's Libra, and that's Scorpio, and so on and so forth. But anyways, this is a cusp of the first house. This is the cusp of the fourth house. This is the cusp of the seventh house. And you can see the house numbers right there.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Okay.
cusp of the 10th house. So the cusp of the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th are called the angular houses. The houses that become before are the succeedent houses, and the ones after are the cadent houses. I might have got that backwards, but that whatever's in the angular houses, especially the first house, is considered like really powerful. Like that's the first house there for you. And what the ascendant is pretty much like the first vibe you give off people, kind of the mask you wear, your personality when like people know you at a superficial level, like when like at first meeting, first glance. It's kind of like your appearance and everything like that. The fourth house is kind of like maybe how you had it growing up at home, um, things like that. Your private life, who you're most intimate with. And the seventh house, the cusp of the seventh house is kind of like the relationship and the kind of people that you're attracted to and kind of people that you seek. May not necessarily be the right kind of people you seek, but it definitely indicates like your love life and things like that. And
Okay.
in the 10th house is like the house of your career and your public image and your reputation and kind of what people think of you in a societal whole, like kind of at work and things like that.
Mm.
But anyways, your sun in Virgo, and it's actually kind of, you can see the lines right there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That line right there is the sun, and that line right there is the ascendant. So when something's that close to one another, it's an angle called a conjunction. Like all these crazy lines and stuff over here. That's going to be a little bit more confusing for me because I should have used the other software. I'm just more used to it. All the
Yeah.
cheap color lines, but I need to get used to that. But we'll get to those more a little bit later. But a conjunction is like when 2 points or two planets are really, really close together. And the tighter the conjunction, the more powerful the aspect is. Kind of like you can see this conjunction right here. That's
Mm-hmm.
probably like a degree apart. That's probably like a degree apart. I don't have your list up there. But there's something called orbs, which is like there's 300. This is a circle, so there's 360 degrees going all the way around it. This is like us. We're on Earth, and you can like kind of see the sun as the hour hand of a clock, the moon as like a minute hand, and the ascendant as a second hand. That's why a birth time is so important. Even if you have like if you gave me a birth time maybe like 10 minutes earlier, your ascendant would be up here, and you would be
Wow.
a Leo ascendant, and all these houses would be thrown off, and all these houses represent something or another. Kind of like the signs represent something or another, and the planets represent something or another. So it's kind of confusing. So when I'm
Yeah.
explaining this stuff, one complaint I get is that they just don't know the basics, and it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
That's
I
kind
can
of a
see
quick
that.
rundown.
I
Yeah.
can see that. They A lot of people don't know their birth time either when they were actually born, because they
Yeah.
don't bother to look at their birth certificate.
Yeah, some birth certificates in some states don't even have their birth time. Kind of
Wow.
weird. Yeah.
Wow.
Or like sometimes like the doctors, they could be wrong too. Like when my son was born, I wasn't even astrology yet and I was keeping track of it. I looked at the clock. I don't know if the clock was right, but he was born like 5:46 according to that clock, but on his birth certificate it says 5:41.
Wow. That's a big difference. That's a 5-minute difference.
Yeah,
Jeez.
it can be a difference, but
Mhm.
like a lot of this stuff, like you don't really have anything besides the sun that's real close to the angulars of the house. So like if your birth time's off like 10, 20 minutes, it's probably not gonna be a huge deal unless if you're a Leo ascendant, which a Leo ascendant will kind of make some sense to you. So, but anyways, so the sun is kind of like the sun and the ascendant are kind of confusing. So this is kind of like the personality, the mask that you wear, like at first glance when people first get an image of you and kind of like their first impression of you. The sun's like your overarching ego. It's your it can kind of like link to your romance style because the sun, it rules Leo. Where's Leo? There's Leo, the sign Leo, and the sun also rules the 5th house. So all those things are going to have similarities, but there's going to be some differences, especially the houses. The houses are quite a bit different than the planet that rules them. So the sun is kind of like the king of the solar system. It gives everything light and it gives everything life, and its gravitation pull, because the mass is so great, kind of holds everything together like glue, and everything orbits around it. So it's kind of like the boss.
Mm-hmm.
And in Virgo, that just kind of means Virgo represents, it kind of gets a bad reputation. Virgo is kind of like one of the sticklers of the zodiac. It is a mutable earth sign. So it's very grounded, it's very concrete, it's very rational. It's also like the sign of servitude, kind of like back in the old traditional days. And also traditional astrology, they looked at things like good and bad, like, oh, your son's here, that's good. Like your son's technically in the 12th house. They would have said that's bad. And it can be bad, but it doesn't have to be bad. It's kind of like what you make it.
What you make it, yeah.
But it's also like it's a ration. It's like intellect. It can be about speaking and communication. That's probably a little bit more Gemini. It's ruled by Mercury right here. And Mercury is the planet of intelligence, communication. It's kind of the trickster thing. It's how you interact with people and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And it rules 2 different planets, or it rules 2 different signs and 2 different houses. And one of them is Virgo. So it's in its house ruler. We'll get to that a little bit later. I'm jumping a gun. But anyways, it's like your overarching personality style, your overarching leadership style. So with it being in Virgo, it's probably like you work in the service industry more or less. So it's kind of like the house or the sign of being a servant. Not like that you're a slave or anything like that. It's just that you need to develop skills and help humanity with it. And the 12th house is ruled by Pisces, or it's associated with Pisces over here. The modern ruler is Neptune and traditional ruler is Jupiter, because back in ancient times we didn't discover Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto. So they had traditional rulers, which I don't pay as much attention to because I think that was just the best fit to what they knew.
Yep.
But the 12th house in the ancients would have seen this as kind of bad or negative. This is like the house of troubles, the house of secrets. And you have a 12th house moon there too, which is pretty powerful in Leo. But it could also represent like psychosis. It could represent delusions. It could represent mental illness. I know you said you have the schizoaffective.
Mm-hmm.
It could represent prisons or mental hospitals. It can represent, but kind of like some people's theory is like we're all kind of born with this psychic energy, and having a 12th house sun and a 12th house moon means that you have strong psychic energy because it's associated with Pisces and Neptune. Those are kind of like hippie, everybody get along and sing around a campfire and sing kumbaya kind of energy. It's also this weird social justice bullshit energy too. But yeah, anyways, so it's kind of like you need to be a spiritual leader is kind of what it's saying, especially since it's in the 1st house, because the 1st house is ruled by Mars. Where's your Mars at? Up here. And the sign associated with the 1st house is Aries. So this is like the first sign of the zodiac. It represents the spring equinox. It starts spring, and it goes Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, so on and so forth. And the first house is about asserting yourself. It's about leadership. It's about kind of like getting over the wound. This is kind of like the big wound, the house of secrets, the house of troubles. It's like your overarching ego, and like you have to make your sun happy, and you have to make your moon happy, because the moon represents your emotional state, like how you need to be nurtured and how you need to be felt secure. So kind of like you need to develop skills and help other people, but the moon here in Leo in the 12th house, it's kind of like, you're very open. You're like an open book. You share your stories pretty openly, and
That's
should be kind of,
crazy. It's crazy how spot on that is.
yeah. It's
You know,
weird how
even
it
with the
works.
mental illness and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah, prison, jail, drug addiction, you know, that's a trip.
Yep. And that's too, like Pisces, 12th house, and Neptune. It could be about escapism, because we all have this inborn psychic energy, but modern society tells you, no, you're crazy if you believe in this stuff. There's no spiritual side. Science can't replicate this. It can't understand it. It can't study it. Therefore, it's not real. So like if you kind of have the spiritual side to you, people like look at you like you're stupid.
Yeah.
So people that's why like I think there's just so much mental illness in the world these days, because people are just suppressing this energy.
Yep, it's just being stuffed down. They don't know how to let it out.
So it's interesting because, like I said, it's also represents, the 12th house can represent like religion and spirituality. And like you said, you were in prison, which is associated with the 12th house, and you kind of started the Asatru movement in prison, right? Is that what you said?
Yep.
So that is something very 12th house Virgo. Yeah. So that's something that like you really needed to do, because this is a house of leadership, and the sun is also about leadership too. So you need to be a leader of some type. Do you still participate in that, by the way, the Asatru stuff, or no?
Oh, absolutely. Matter of fact, I'm doing the Celtic Festival is coming up, and I'll be volunteering there. It's pretty cool, man. There's they do K-bars and a lot of the old like Norse and Scottish and Germanic games and things like that. Yeah, man, I'll send you an invite if you're interested.
Yeah, because my son's been asking questions, like people been putting like Jesus and Christianity in his head, and I don't really want him growing. I don't want him like getting into religion until he's like old enough to decide for himself.
Understand it. Yeah.
But I want him to get like
smart.
a broad perspective of religion.
And I really believe, yeah. Well, organized religion, I really believe is just it's a way to control the masses in a nice way, And so I think that's great when you can make a decision on what your spirituality preference is when you're old enough to comprehend what's really going on,
Yeah, because people are brainwashing their little fucking kids, and they're like, "Oh, if you don't believe this, you're going to go to hell and burn forever."
Yeah, using fear tactics, man.
That's all it is.
It's what Christianity's done for centuries.
Yep, and
they stole all the pagan holidays. They stole it just to manipulate. Here, we'll throw this in there so it's a little more familiar for you.
Very much, yeah. And they didn't really spread their message through joy and love. They did it through torture and genocide, and rape
and murder. Yeah,
it's terrible.
You believe what we believe, or we will destroy you. So people started having to do their things in secrecy. So that's why you get the holidays like Easter and things like that, because pagans were like, well, how are we gonna celebrate our belief system without being persecuted? So we're doing this because Jesus was born on this day.
Yeah, which was actually from Mithras, which was a Persian god. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you think about the Asatru religion too, and the Norse religion, even the days of the week, you got Thor's Day, Friday.
Yeah.
Saturn is Saturday, but I mean, and then you got Cheers Day, Woden's Day, which is Wednesday. I mean, there's just so many different things. It makes me laugh every time I catch something, because I'm like, wait a minute, wait, and then they think that like Christopher Columbus was the first person to land in the Americas. No, it was the Norse. The Norse were tradesmen. People always like look at like Vikings and the Pecks and things like that as raping, pillaging, and plundering. No, they were surviving, and they learned to use the sea and trade routes. They learned how to use what wasn't a compass then, but it became a compass. They learned how to navigate the waters, which allowed them to start up a trade system. And they would go around and collect all these things that are from different lands and come back and trade with people and survive. I mean, the climate and starvation and things like that were the barriers then. Now it's just completely different. We have different, we have addiction, we have mental health, things like that. That's the things that we are trying to navigate through. Yeah, I think that's good. You should definitely tell your son to look at all things before making decisions.
Yeah,
'Cause,
it's just a matter of time. We'll talk about that more after the meeting
yeah.
if you want. But anyways, going back to the moon. So, like I said, it's your emotional state. It can be like your intuitive side. It's kind of like what you need to feel secured and nurtured. The moon rules Cancer and the
Mhm.
fourth house, which is an angular house as well, which we'll get to a little bit later. But it is in the 12th house, like I said. So you probably had like a lot of emotional trauma growing up. Maybe people didn't listen to you and things like that.
Yep.
And it's in Leo, which kind of even makes it worse because Leo is about kind of like it's attention seeking in a lot of ways. It needs like that pat on the back. So just getting like acknowledged for like your work and your accomplishments and what you contribute is probably like huge for you.
Oh, absolutely.
And it makes you feel all good and fuzzy inside and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I did a good job.
Yeah. You probably didn't get that growing up, which we'll talk
Oh,
about
not at
more.
all. No,
Yeah.
no. I got abuse. That was it growing up. Oh.
Yeah. So definitely all this like two of the three major points. Well, I guess the ascendant's always the cusp of the first house, but it's not far away. Definitely indicates a lot of troubles growing up. But what you can do is take all that trouble and learn it and kind of grow from it. Anyways, we talked about the ascendant a little bit. It's kind of like you're like kind of like how people first see you. And you have Mercury in the first house too. So whatever you have in the first house, kind of like it can give you a lot of trouble in the beginning. But Mercury is not necessarily a negative planet, so to say,
That's
like
my
the
ruling.
ancients would
That's my
say.
ruling planet, correct? If I remember correctly, it's my ruling planet.
Yeah, because there's this thing called the final depositor. So you would look where your ascendant's at, and it's in Virgo, and you would find the ruler of Virgo, which is Mercury, and Mercury's sitting right at home in Virgo.
Wow.
So your life and everything centered around your chart is going to be about your intellect and communication. Like all this stuff. Like it blew me away when I was working with you, and you know all this stuff about the Asatru and religion and like drugs and stuff. You could tell me like all the effects and stuff of it. Like, wow,
Yep.
that's pretty interesting. But yeah, like anybody who kind of has this in the first house kind of is meant to be like a speaker. I really think like you have a really interesting life. Like all this bad shit that happened to you, it was terrible growing up, but it's kind of karma that you had to work through that carried over. Maybe you did something in life that wasn't so good and kind of had to pay for it. We can
Yep.
get to that a little bit more, but you have a story to share for sure. Like starting like a podcast or writing a book or something like that would be really beneficial for you.
Heck yeah. I've thought about writing a book. I just need to actually jot down some ideas and maybe work with somebody who's more skilled at writing, and then get it edited and stuff like that.
Yeah, I want to write stuff, but I'm just like super busy. But yeah,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, it's like, when do you have time to do shit like that?
Yeah. Well, maybe we could work together on something like that. Who knows? Just do it like slowly but surely.
Little at a time.
But I'm trying to get all this shit launched too.
Heck yeah. It's cool, man. Good for you.
Yeah. So it's like about your intellect and everything like that and communication style. So your Mercury is in Virgo in the first house. So it can actually make you intelligent, like maybe and like a really good speaker and things like that. And you like to talk. And also these two represent like anxiety. I noticed that you had a lot of anxiety, you said, and kind of make you like a chatterbox and a lot of things like that. And
Yeah. I get real manic-y out of nowhere because of the anxiety. Yeah.
yeah. And also like another interesting thought too is your midheaven up here is in Gemini, which is the other sign that Mercury rules. And this
Oh,
is
wow.
even more about like this is like Virgo is like learning and stuff for like skills and being in service of others. This is kind of like the investigative, like learning about people, like talking and interviewing people, researching and things like that. And it can be really super chattery too. And at work, you just like people kind of see like you like to talk to people and get to know people, and you're real like chitter chatter and a lot of things like that.
Yep, like you said, I'm an open book, so I just talk away.
Yeah. So
And
that
a
can
lot
be
of
like
that goes back. A lot of that goes back to that nervousness too, though. You know,
yeah. Where do you think that nervousness comes from?
I don't know. I've dealt with it my whole life, man. It's like any uncomfortable situation, it feels like my insides are vibrating.
Hmm.
I almost feel like I'm having a heart attack. Um, the only thing that makes it feel better is either balling up into kind of the fetal position on the couch or on my bed or something, or movement. So I move a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, it's been a problem for a long time. Not so much when I was actively using substances and things like that. But even with medication, it hasn't even helped, completely. But I get it all the time. Like, I mean, but people think I'm using methamphetamine and things like that. And I'm just nervous constantly.
Yeah.
It's just a nervous energy. People make me nervous. I mean, it could be maybe the abuse, the post-traumatic stress. I don't know.
Yeah. I was
Who
going to say
knows?
a lot of that probably stemmed from all the stuff that happened here in your childhood.
Yeah. It's funny that it picks that up. It even tells you that you're going to be that I'm nervous.
Yeah.
Said you're nervous. You talk a lot. Like it's funny.
It
How
can
spot
be.
on.
It kind of, you have to look at the whole chart as a whole. It's hard to say like one point means, because I have Mercury and Virgo too, but it's over here in 11th house.
Okay.
Which you have some stuff in 11th house, so we'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
But next is Venus, which is right here. It is actually right here making conjunction with Jupiter. So
Wow.
Venus is about how we express our femininity. It's about how we relate to people. It's kind of like about finding what is beautiful to us and creating beauty in that sense. So like in traditional astrology, they say, oh, this is a woman and this is Mars and this is a male.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody has a Venus placement, everybody has a Mars placement, and so on and so
We
forth.
all have male and female aspects about us, period. And I
Yeah.
mean, we all carry testosterone and estrogen. It makes sense,
Yep.
It's
So
interesting too, though. I mean, definitely interesting.
yeah. And it's actually it's a depositor too, because it's in a sign. It rules Libra.
Libra. Yeah.
And it also rules Taurus up here.
Oh, wow.
So it's about relationships and beauty and things like that. So Libra is also about relationships. It's kind of the sign of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I said Mercury rules Gemini, go back a little bit, Virgo and Gemini. Mercury also rules the third house, which you have your Uranus in, and the sixth house, which is empty, but we'll get to empty houses in a little bit. But anyways, Venus, it's also in a house of the second house, which it rules, which is associated with Taurus. And Libra rules the seventh house. It's associated with the seventh house, I should say. So relationships are going to be a big part of your life, and developing relationships are really important, especially since it's conjunct Jupiter right here, this 4 symbol. And whatever Jupiter touches or whatever it's aspected to, it's going to grow and expand and make big. So this is probably like something that kind of makes you like extroverted and chatty as well, because it is in the planet of relationships, in the sign of relationships. But the second house, it can represent like your body, your physical body. It can represent your self-esteem, like a lack of self-esteem or high self-esteem and things like that, and what you value and resources. It's called the house of money, but that's just a real vague term. It can be about money, but it could also be about resources that are basic for survival, which is love and or like food, water, clothing, shelter, things like that. And you have this big stellium
Yeah.
in the second house and Libra.
That's all
What
the
is
things that I didn't have as a child that it seems like I have an abundance. And it seems like it should have an abundance of it, but maybe that's because I never had it. So I tend to try to hold on to all of it, resources, love, even if it means bringing the wrong people in my life in the past. Um, all relationships, I've gotten a little better with boundaries and reading people, but I used to let just anybody in,
yeah.
but we learn our lessons as we grow older.
Yeah, and I was going to get to that too because there's a stellium. So when you have like 3 or more planets in one sign or one house, which you have in the second house and in Libra, that means it's like a big concentrated area. So you have Saturn, which in ancient astrology is seen as the great malefic, and Jupiter here is seen as the great benefic.
Okay.
What that means is like this is the shittiest thing in the sky, and this is like the greatest thing in the sky. And you
Wow.
also have Pluto here, which is the sign of death, the sign of hardship. Both of Jupiter and Saturn are the signs kind of like of hardship. This is kind of like just to explain this a little bit. So like this is lack, this is limitation, this is restriction. So you're restricted with resources, you're restricted with positive relationships because these 3 point here are making a real tight conjunction. You got Jupiter, you got that's Saturn, that's Jupiter, and that's Venus. So you probably really strive and you really want deep, meaningful relationships, and it expands it. But you also got the planet of restriction and limitation also touching it. So it probably like this is touching it too. So this is like expanding the effects of Saturn, and this is need and this want and this lack of relationships that you had in nurturance and growing up. And I think you said you grew up in a trap house out in the desert in California with no utilities and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Or
yeah, until I was 8 when and then I was placed into foster care. Yeah, taken away from
yeah,
my parents. Yeah. I'm wondering too, like you say that death and stuff, it's I'm restricted right now because my wife is terminally ill, really sick, and so it takes a lot of my time. So I don't really have a chance to socialize and do those kind of things that I crave, like
yeah,
like we're doing right now. You know, it's important
absolutely.
for me. It makes me feel, I know, accepted, I guess. You know.
Yeah, that's definitely a big theme that we're going to get to eventually. But Saturn, like they say, it's bad, and it can seem bad, and it can be real bad, but it's about working hard. It's about disciplining yourself. It's about overcoming your fears and overcoming those limitations and getting over that. So maybe like we'll talk about your South Node in that story in a little bit. But yeah, so you kind of have to get over that. And Pluto, just skip ahead a little bit too, is about death and transformation. It doesn't have to be literal death. It can be about figurative death. It could be like, oh, you got off drugs and you got, like you said, you met your wife and she got you clean. So that could be a big part of it. But
Yep.
initially, like wherever Pluto's at, it's really, really rough. And wherever Saturn's at, it's really, really rough. And you just have to work really hard to overcome it and find meaningful relationships. And like you said, you have to vet people. You can't just let anybody walk in and kind of,
Yeah, claim me as a friend.
yeah, or a lover or whoever,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of people out there that are going to screw you over. But anyways, yeah, that's what this is. Just trying to go around, and we'll kind of integrate all this shit eventually, but it's all connected one way or the other. I don't want to do that. Get away. Next, we'll go up to Mars. Your Mars is really interesting. So your Mars is in Cancer, and it's in the 11th house. So what Mars represents is how you express your masculinity. The negative sides to it, that it's aggressive, it's about fighting and war and death and quote unquote toxic masculinity. But the good sides, it's like your leadership style too. It's how you assert yourself, it's how you take action, it's how you want, it's like your wants and desires. And like ancients would say, this is in its detriment. So when certain planets are in certain signs that don't gel with it, it's in a sign of Cancer, which is ruled by the moon over here, which is complete opposite energy, which is a real feminine energy. This is kind of seen as the mother of the zodiac. And like, again, like they translate it as literally like your mom or literally like a woman in your life, which it
Yep.
can be. But pretty much what Mars in that means is like you really want to find a family. You didn't have that growing up. You had that lack. Like you can see this red line right here. It's called a square. What a square is, it's a 90-degree aspect. And the ancients would see that as bad, like it's no good. And it's squaring your Pluto down here. So this is kind of like the trauma. Pluto's the house or the planet of psychology. It's the house of trauma. It's a house of like overcoming shit you need to get over and things like that. And it's making that negative square, which means it's frictional. So we got two, I don't know if you have any oppositions. Yeah, you do. So an opposition is 180 degrees, which we'll talk about a little bit. Your Mars is actually making this opposition to your south node because it is conjunct your north node, which we'll get into a little bit. But an opposition is 180 degrees and a square is a 90 degrees. So a square is like a half of an opposition, and an opposition is 180 degrees. So it's obviously half of a circle. So it's like all the way across. So this is like an internal friction, something that's internal that's driving you. So like your strive and need for relationships and Cancer and love and acceptance and nurturance and finding your own tribe, basically, because the 11th house is associated with Aquarius and Uranus, which is about like genius, not necessarily like Einstein, 180 IQ genius, astrophysicist, whatever. It can be about like something that you just do better than anybody else, kind of like Michael Jordan jumping from the free throw line, sailing 10 feet through the air and gliding through the air. That's an intelligence. Like he can do things with his body that other people can't do. And that's something that Mars too, it could represent athleticism and things like that as well. But anyways, what I'm getting at is this is a sign, or the house of community. It's the house of like strategic thinking, forward thinking, forming groups and bonds. It can be kind of flighty and doesn't like to get too close to anybody. But with it in this, it's like real emotional, finding family, finding your tribe. So I kind of see this as you joining like the gang, like the Armenian lifestyle. Like you couldn't have your love and nurturance growing up, growing in your home with your dad and your mom and going into foster care. So the only thing you knew was like hate and crime and drugs and violence. So you tried finding a family in a gang. So like you went to prison and you're a part of all that and stuff like that. But you eventually like, kind of saw the light and pulled your head out of your ass, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we'll go down to Jupiter, which I talked about a little bit already, is about growth, expansion, prosperity, luck. It's kind of like an extroverted sign. So a deep need for relationships, but a deep restriction and limitation on those relationships. Like your wife, what we're talking about here, is sick and terminally ill. And like this is about like healing and about medical. It's about, is Chiron on here? Yeah, it's up there. We'll get to that in a little bit. But this is like the sign of servitude, like helping others. And this is associated with medical too, like health and wellness and stuff. So it's kind of like a karmic bond that you have to kind of like take care of your wife. And this is also about like the afterlife. The 8th house is too. You have nothing in there, but like helping people kind of who are sick. And eventually, like you said, she's terminally ill and just a matter of time, unfortunately, before she goes. But that's kind of like the karma, like Saturn is the lord of karma that you have, where you have to like kind of take care of other people. So like you're going to be restricted earlier on and have a bad life and a hard relationships. It's about hardship and stuff down here. And Jupiter's kind of touching and expanding that. Like I said before, this is a great benefic. It's supposed to be like the greatest thing in astrology. Like wherever this touches, it's supposed to where you have real good luck and stuff. But since it has Saturn right there and Pluto not far away, it's kind of hindering that, unfortunately.
Kind of checks and balances, kind of balances that out. It's funny though, because I've been told all the time I have really good luck. I step in shit and come out smelling like flowers, was what my old cellmate used to say.
Really? You had good luck born in with a dad and a mom who are drug addicts and going into foster care and becoming a like sex trafficker? That's good luck.
That's what I said. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, went to prison. Like it doesn't seem like good luck to me. I got caught. Fuck.
What was his?
I like your realism.
Yeah. What was his ration for you having good luck?
Because I would do dumb shit and get away with it, basically, and he would do dumb shit and get himself into trouble.
Well, yeah, you
That's
probably
really
think,
only the only reason. That's his only reasoning for saying that. I personally feel I have good luck in certain ways, but I don't feel I've always had that luck. I feel that luck's only come as I've made sacrifices to change things.
yeah,
I still don't feel like I have good luck. I mean, shit. Look, I mean, I got, there's just a lot of things. I still have my wife's dying. I picked a wife that's dying, et cetera, et cetera. This is a lot of just different shit. I don't agree with it, but that's what I used to always be told is I smell like shit, or I step in shit and come out smelling like flowers.
well, did you, like when you did stuff, did you plan it out and like, this is like a better chance of getting away with it? Because most people in prison are just really impulsive, like, oh, I'm gonna do that, and I don't care if I get caught. You don't even think about the consequences. Did you kind of consider the consequences, or did you like, what did you kind of do?
No, the consequences are there, but you always think that it's not going to happen to you. Oh,
Yeah.
but that's not going to happen to me. Just like overdosing when I was using heroin. I know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but that only happens to other people. It's not going to happen to me. Sure
Yeah.
enough, it happened to me 4 times. I mean, you just never consider that it's going to happen to you. But yeah, I was always that guy that said, "This is stupid. Why are we doing this? Because we're only making half our money when we can do it this way and get all of our money."
Yeah.
So I thought things out. I mean, it might as well make it worth the risk. Is basically my thought process. Is why are we risking? Why are we making risking our freedom and things like that just to get half the money? Like if I'm going to risk, if I'm going to make a risk, it's going to be for something that's worth it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you calculated that a little bit. Like I said,
Yeah, a
your
little bit.
Mars,
Mm-hmm.
your Mars in here, like your gang life and like taking action is kind of in 11th house, which is a little bit more strategic.
Yeah.
Also, the 11th house and Saturn is kind of like you have to like it takes time. Like Saturn is seen as father time. It's Bor in the Norse mythology. I don't know much about Bor, but that's kind of like who he represents. Like Bor is the grandfather of Thor, and Jupiter is Odin, and uh Thor is Mars,
Mm-hmm.
and Frida or Freetag is the moon, and
Okay.
Loki or Wutan I think is Mercury. They could kind of like both interchange because it's like the trickster.
Okay, the trickster. Yep.
Yeah, but who is Wotan?
So Wotan is another name for Odin. Odin has a lot of names. Odin,
Oh,
Wotan, Woden, um, Green Man, Carnunos. There's a lot of different names that you can call Odin.
okay. I thought
Yeah.
Wotan was someone different, like a messenger, but that was Heimdall, I guess.
Heimdall guards the Bifrost Bridge. He is the
Yeah,
messenger. He's the in between from worlds to Asgard. So from every world that exists, the Bifrost Bridge connects. Well, you have to get past Heimdall in order to cross that bridge.
and he's like the all-seeing one. He can see everywhere and kind of
Yeah,
knows when danger's
pretty much.
coming.
He's the one that sees everything and reports back to whoever needs to be reported back to.
That's pretty cool because like these are based off Greek mythology, but they kind of go hand in hand with Norse and Roman and all that shit. But like
Oh yeah, big time. Big time. They connect like that.
you read about the gods and you kind of see like where it came from and stuff like that. Like this is based off Hermes and all that, and this is the god of war, and it's kind of interesting.
It is cool.
Anyways, we talked about Jupiter and we talked about Saturn a little bit, so hardship and relationships. But once you get over this hardship and stuff, and it might just come to the point like where your wife dies, and maybe that'll be kind of freeing for you and freeing for her because her pain and suffering will end. It'll be unfortunate and hard and not good, but maybe she'll be better off in going to the afterlife and going to somewhere where she's more at peace. So that could be something that comes later in life, like I say, and usually after your 40s.
Mm-hmm.
This is something like you'll find your group, you'll find your community, you'll find people that you fit in, and your North Node is kind of like the destiny that you need to point to. You're slowly but surely getting there. All right, probably enough about Saturn and Jupiter for right now. Talk about Uranus, what actually might be more like Loki, but they didn't know about Uranus back then.
Yeah.
So Uranus represents like it goes against the grain. It's about rebellion. It's about independence. It's about personal freedom. It could also be about criminality, about like going against the grain, being a rebel, things like that. It's like the weirds. It's about weird. It's about different. It's about being original. And it's in Scorpio. I can't write down there for some reason, but there's Scorpio, which is associated with Pluto, which is like the sign of death and the sign of transformation. It could also be about like seduction and allure and like sexuality. Yeah, like planet, like that could represent like the sex trafficking, sexual abuse, sexual taboos, things that are kind of nasty and going against the grain of society, like unfortunately like child molestation and things like that. But yeah, that could be like, it could also be about criminality and going to jail, but it's in the third house, which I said is associated with Mercury over here. And the third house is linked with your communication and your intelligence and how you interact with people. It could also be about short distance journeys, while the ninth house is about long distance journeys, like traveling over water, trips that take more than 24 hours, basically. It could also be about siblings and things like that as well. But kind of like you communicate different. Maybe like you said, like you communicate like an open book. Yeah, it kind of is. It's probably like a loose sextile. So what a sextile is, like you got one right here. We haven't talked much about the aspects. I'm going to integrate them later. But a sextile is a 60-degree aspect, and it's kind of seen as good, something that you're talented as, and something that flows well. But too much of a good thing can turn to a bad thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We'll talk about Neptune there, and that's a really interesting sextile that's going there and going to your moon and actually making this. It's like almost like a cradle. You got that trine that's going there. Not quite, though. That's an interesting formation you got going on. But anyways, this is kind of like maybe you talk different. Maybe this is just like you're just like an open book. It is actually going towards your Chiron, which is an asteroid that's between Uranus and Saturn, and it's kind of like your wound that needs healed, which we'll get to a little bit more. But you communicate about that wound. You communicate about all the stuff that you did. This is about, again, like relationships and your self-esteem and your self-worth and things like that. And it's kind of associated with religion. The ninth house is about religion and spirituality and higher learning. So healing from all your past wounds through like the Asatru stuff would be real beneficial. And it goes back down to communicating with it and kind of having that 180-degree opposition. Like maybe you talk too much, maybe kind of ratted yourself out or ratted other people out because you are too open and you kind of just get chatty and jittery and nervous and things like that. And that could have
we
led
talked
you.
about that before. I have a tendency to overshare.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it gets me in trouble, because I
Yep.
overshare, and either people get people either like me or they don't like me, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
like when I overshare, a lot of times it gets used against me by people who don't like me, whereas the people who do like me appreciate my sharing and things like that. So there's no middle ground. It's either black or white.
Speaking of chaos, this is the planet of chaos and disruption and kind of throwing a wrench into the gears and kind of screwing things up. And it is making a very small, like this little red dotted line here. It's making a very loose square. Like we talked about the orbs, like this is a tighter orb than, oops, get away. And turn my pencil back on.
Is there a meaning between when it's a dotted line instead of a full line?
Yeah, so I'm not too familiar with the software, like I said, but that definitely is a square, which is a 90-degree frictional aspect. Okay. But it's the orbs I was talking about. Like this is real tight of an orb for a conjunction, but you look at this like over here, that's a little bit looser of an orb. So rather than 90 degrees, this might be like 80 or 100 or 95 or something like that, or 85 rather than closer to a 90.
Okay.
But kind of like you like to stir the pot a little bit. You like to stir the shit a little bit, and that can kind of go against your ego and go against kind of like your higher meaning of what you need to kind of accomplish. So maybe like Like you told that one guy, Hope, whatever, go choke on a bag of dicks or whatever.
Yeah. The CEO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that your mouth, basically, because this is like how you communicate can get you in trouble. Like you have a hard time biting your tongue.
I got a problem with authority a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what this is it goes against authority. Next we'll go to Neptune, which I said rules Pisces and rules the 12th house. This is kind of like your spirituality, everybody get along, seeing kumbaya and all that stuff. But if you kind of block this psychic emotional energy, like they say, like Uranus, like when we discovered Uranus in the 1700s, like we had a big technology boom. Uranus can be about technology and innovation and growth and things like that. We've went from working on farms to factories, and that's kind of like when the industrial age exploded. When we discovered Neptune, we kind of had a reconnaissance of spirituality, like there were seances, astrology came back real strong, and spirituality and religion and things like outside of like Christianity and the quote unquote organized religions. And Pluto, when it was discovered in 1930, we had an explosion in psychology because it's the planet of psychology. We had like Jung and Freud and the invention of therapy and the invention of subconscious and the unconscious and personal unconscious, collective unconscious. But yeah, if we're not taking care of this deep emotional energy, because this is seen as a higher octave of Venus, Uranus seen as a higher octave of Mercury, and Pluto is kind of seen as a higher octave of Mars.
Yeah.
So this is kind of about relationships and love and femininity and all that stuff. And spirituality is a big thing. Psychic energy. If we're not expressing this and we're not letting it out in a healthy way, it can lead to escapism, which can be drugs, alcohol, risky, promiscuous sex. It could be about binge watching Netflix or playing video games all day, reading shitty romance novels or fantasy
Gambling or
novels,
shopping. Yep.
gambling. Yep. So kind of like you've repressed all this trauma, and it's making that sextile, that 160-degree aspect that's seen as quote unquote good by the ancients, but like all this trauma right here and stuff. And that probably led to a lot of, the drug abuse and the heroin and going to crime and going to prison and things like that. But it's in the 4th house, and the 4th house is ruled by the moon and Cancer. It's associated with Cancer. And this is called the IC or the nadir. It's 26 degrees, your Uranus, and this is 3 degrees. So that is like 7 or 17 degrees away. So that's not quite a conjunction. Oh, no, wait. That's only 7 degrees. So this is making a conjunction. Okay. So that's interesting too. So like I said, the 1st, the 4th, and the 7th, and the 10th are the cusp of the angular houses.
Yeah.
This is about like your home life and your family life, and that is making a conjunction with this line right here. Wow. So kind of like that goes back to like your Mars and Cancer in 11th house, like your criminal family, the mob, the gang life.
Yeah.
So you kind of grew up in a home life that was kind of chaotic and different. You got ripped away and taken into DCS custody and all that unfortunate stuff that did happen to you. But you can also find a family through spirituality and your religion, and kind of making like an Asatru, because that's going to a sextile to your Pluto, which is a part of this big stellium down here with all your terrible relationships and your growing up and your hardships there. And it's also making a sextile to your moon, which is in a 12th house, which you need your spiritual, emotional healing through spirituality and growth and camaraderie and recognition and creativity and expressing yourself. And this is making a trine, which we haven't really talked about yet, which is 120 degree. It's half of a sextile, which is a harmonious aspect as well. So you kind of got all this stuff working together. So taking your spirituality, this is also about healing, spiritual healing, healing all this trauma that's going on here with your relationships and everything that's going on there, and taking all that about the 12th house, which is also about healing yourself, healing your wound, which is making a square to your Chiron, which we'll talk about next or eventually. There's a lot of squiggly lines. Let me clean that up a little bit. But yeah, I think, like continuing with the Asatru services, is that like a weekly thing you go to, or is that like a congregation?
No, man. So it is because it's not as well known. people are starting to come back to the old ways. There's not a lot of covens. There's not a lot of um, there's not a lot of groups. You have to get involved with the group. I personally do the Asatru, like, bloats. We call them bloat celebrations and stuff for all the major solstices, major events like Leif Erikson. I do one for Leif Erikson Day. Just little things like that. I blow the horn, I evoke, the four corners, and then basically, me and my wife are the ones that do it. I'm finding people. Matter of fact, gentleman that works maintenance here, Russell, he's big into the Asatru Religion. So people are starting to come into my life that have the same belief patterns or are interested in the same belief patterns, and our belief systems. And so I continue to do what I do privately, but now I'm getting involved. Now I'm finally finding people and getting involved with the Celtic Festival and things like that. Now, the Celtic Festival isn't necessarily Asatru. There are several people that are Asatru, but then there's also people who are like Druids or Wiccan or, different types of other pagan religions as well.
Yeah, that's cool. I might be interested in something like that. Like I said, getting my son, because like my name Nichols came from Nichol's son.
Yeah.
And when the Vikings settled like in Ireland and Great Britain and shit, they saw, oh, that's a heathen name. We're going to take off the O-N and make it Nichols. So
yep.
I got some lineage there somewhere or some way.
That's cool, man. Heck yeah. It's really good to get into your ancestry, and why not worship and believe in the things our ancestors did,
Is it
it's they call it they called it for a long time a dying religion, because most of the sagas and things were not written down. They were passed down through, their folk stories. They were passed down at the fire. The families would sit around the fire and eat or whatever and tell stories about Thor and about Odin and about Freya and the runes and where they came from. And it wasn't like a written thing. I mean, they did have a form of writing. They wrote in runes. They wrote in the Futhark, which is one of the first forms of writing. But I would definitely educate yourself, man, and get into it. And I'll throw you some invites to Celtic Festival. Maybe you might not be interested in Asatruism. Maybe you might lean more towards, Druidism or something else. You never know.
Yeah, I got spiritual beliefs. It's more like pantheistic, like everything's God, and I don't really worship a direct deity, and we're all a part of the same source.
Yeah, that's scientific right there. We're all made of carbon,
Yeah, we're all stardust. But anyways, yeah, I think really being a spiritual religious leader with all the sun and moon energy right here is something that would be beneficial, and taking all that pain and trauma and suffering. And so is the Asatru, is that like a direct deity worship, or
Asatruism? Well, many deities. There's many deities. But it's, I guess to explain it basically is nature's law. I'll call it that. It is deity worship, in a sense. But bottom line is, I believe in nature's law. What do I mean by that? A bird doesn't mate with a lizard. That's the best way to explain it. Nature's law is, if I'm to walk up to a dam and I find a rock in that dam, and I take that rock without giving something back to that dam, something may happen, something may not happen. But then you come up to that dam and you do the same thing, and so does the next person, the next person. If none of us return something from where we took it, eventually there'll be nothing left there, right? That's nature's law. So if we take something, we give it back. It is a direct deity. It is an Aryan religion. It is there. Most that's why it gets a lot of bad rap, Asatruism, because of, like the skinheads and the white power movement.
Yeah.
Along with they went from being like Christian identity and things like that to utilizing, like Hitler did, the propaganda, using it for propaganda. Because Germanic heathenry has a history in Germany, but it wasn't supposed to be a negative thing. It was made into a negative thing. And so people are continuing to do the same thing. Like, I used to piss me off in prison when I would go to do Asatru bloats and stuff, and it's nothing but a fucking bunch of fucking idiot racist motherfuckers sitting there politicking and fucking doing something stupid, the people that are supposed to believe in something positive, and they're making it a negative, used to drive me nuts. So a lot of times I wouldn't even go up to, it depends on what yard I was on. I wouldn't even go to services. I would just do my own thing, because it just irritated the shit out of me, because it's not a negative thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's a spirituality. It's, you may worship Thor, but what is Thor really? What does Thor wield? Thor wields a hammer. He wields a Mjolnir. He's the defender of Asgard from the giants, the frost giants, and all the other giants. So what are fucking frost giants? Frost giants are, if you think back to the Norse days, their biggest obstacle was famine and climate. Mm-hmm. So if you take that sense nowadays, what would we be doing? So instead of being worried about, having to defeat frost giants, Thor would be defeating mental illness or addiction or, poverty, things like that, So each one of us wields the same things that Odin did and that what Thor did. We carry that all inside of us. We carry Thor inside of us. We have the ability to beat those giants. We can make changes in our lives that seem impossible. We have the strength of Thor inside of us, So that's kind of how I can explain it to people. We don't have the same problems as they did back then. Does that mean that we don't need to continue to talk about Thor and tell those stories? Because just like the Bible and things like that, they're parables, things like that. They're things, you know what I mean? Like we say something and it's not necessarily
literal truth.
Like, it's not necessarily like fucking Thor's running around beating real giants. He is surviving life in a harsh environment. He is, starving to death, but still managing to survive with his strength. Each one of us can do that. Odin made sacrifices. Why? Odin made sacrifices because he was on a constant search for knowledge. Odin said his biggest fear was losing his ability to think. He didn't mind losing his memories, but he did not want to lose his ability to think. Odin sacrificed, he met Freya. Freya is a Valkyrie. She comes from, she's Vanatru. She comes from, instead of Asgard, she comes from, from her own realm. And she had magic knowledge called Seether magic that Odin wanted to learn. So what did Odin do? Because he wanted to learn this, because it's something he didn't know, he sacrificed his Einherjar, his chosen slain, because when you die in battle, you go to Valhalla. Well, Odin made a deal with Freya. You teach me your Seether magic, and I'll give you first pick of the slain, of the dead, of the Einherjar, of my warriors. Before they go to Valhalla, you can take them with you if that's what you choose, But I mean, people take things so literal, like they're all, and they get used to seeing like Marvel's comics and things like that, which kind of pisses me off that they do that. It's cool that they made it there, it's a story. They're telling a story of Thor and Asgard and things like that, but they make a mockery of it, Yeah. That's not what it is about. These are stories that were told around a fire from the elders to the children. So they told them in a way that they could understand later in life, but was interesting to them. You know, it's so life lessons, nature's law. You must, this is our world. We must defend it. This is our realm. We only get this realm, so, as far as we know. So we need to do what we can to protect it, to protect us, to protect each other. The world's lost right now because, it's influenced by a lot of things that teach you nothing. Christianity doesn't tell you to, that it's important to take care of the world. They don't tell you it's important if you take a tree and cut it down to plant another tree so you have one next time. And that's what's going on is people don't realize they're just raping the resources, and eventually there's going to be none left if you keep doing that. It's nature's law. And you know what? The world will fight back. Mother Earth will fight back.
That's what global warming's about. So yeah, it's kind of like it's archetypal then, like what Jung called the archetypes, which kind of what astrology is based off. Like this may not represent a literal god. Like this is Poseidon or Neptune. I'm not sure what it'd be in Norse mythology, but it kind of just has like that energy and the stories and the kind of the symbolic meaning that kind of portrays it. So yeah, it's kind of like the gist of it. It's more like pantheistic and stuff like that. Yeah. And I grew up reading comics, and Thor was always my favorite, and I was always drawn to that sort of thing. So maybe.
Yeah, he was so brave and he was so strong, and certain things that are difficult for us, like social situations. That might be something that's hard for you. Yeah. Well, you can lean on Thor to get past that. You can lean on the strength of Thor. You're like, fuck. Well, Thor can beat frost giants. I sure as fuck can handle this. Speech I have to sit up in front of, or, this, whatever, this social situation that makes me uncomfortable.
All right. We'll go to Pluto now. Kind of wrap
Pluto.
This up.
This is another one that they didn't know about, right?
Yeah. So this wasn't discovered. It was actually discovered in Flagstaff in 1930.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Little observatory. I want to go up there and look at it one day.
Yeah. That's cool.
But I don't know was there a god of death in Norse mythology?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's
a god of there's a god for everything, really.
Hela. Yeah, I guess that's who that she would represent. It'd be Hades and stuff in Greek mythology, but this is the thing of death and transformation. So it's all this stuff, this negativity you had going on in Libra in the second house about relationships and growing up with family and not giving that love and nurturance, that resource of acceptance and thing that your moon in Leo so desperately needs, is healing all that and getting over it. And this also represents, like, it's Scorpio, which represents a scorpion, but it's also symbolic of the phoenix. Like you burn, then you raise from the ashes and you're reborn. It's about being reborn.
Okay. Yeah. The Asatru religion, the god of death is surprisingly going to be Odin. Odin is not only the god of death, he's the god of war, and he's the god of, what was it? God of death, war, and magic. Sorry. There we go.
So what was Hela then, or Hell?
So Hell is Hell is a goddess, and she's a goddess of death as well. She lives in the underworld, and she rules over the dead. So like people go to hell, Hel instead, or Hela, the god is down there, and what I understand from what I've read in the mythology is she actually lives in a very dark place. And the people that go there are the like purgatory kind of situation where people who with unfinished business wind up down there, or infants, babies that die, because they can't go up to Valhalla. Babies can't go up to Valhalla and fight, and so, and they can't go with Freya and Frey to, that way because they're Valkyries. So she rules Neph. I always have the hard word saying the words Nephilim, and hell is part of Nephilim.
Okay. All right.
And it's just a world of darkness. It's just a dark place.
Yeah. So that is like, it could be about sexual abuse, trauma, taboos. It could be like a lot of weird things about kink and incest and things like that too. And It kind of tells your story of like you in your home life, where instead of being loved and nurtured, you were kind of just trafficking it out. You were
Yeah,
sold for resources for
abused,
other people.
and yeah, that definitely does. Yeah, there's a lot going on right there, huh? It's like all
Yeah.
this good stuff stuffed between bad stuff is what it looks like, you know?
Yeah. Pretty much like Pluto and Saturn are like ganging up on Jupiter and Venus and beating the shit out of them.
Yeah, fucking them up.
But I think you have a story and a message to share. Like I said, you can take all that pain and trauma and channel it through your own spiritual beliefs and kind of nurture yourself and heal others.
Yeah, and use it as a like I've been doing in behavioral health, using it as a way to relate to others and help them see that there's hope and that things get better. You know?
And it also gave you like a different perspective of things, and you kind of communicate that with the third house, and you can take all that trauma and all that death and all that stuff, and you can kind of assert yourself to your north node, which we'll get in here in a minute. But we'll go to Chiron real quick. Like I said, Chiron is an asteroid. It's about the size of the state of Massachusetts, so it's pretty small, and it's floating on an orbit between Uranus and Saturn. I kind of see it as a stray little moon of Pluto. But Chiron in Greek mythology was a centaur, and he was abandoned by his mom because somehow he came out half horse. I don't know what she was doing, but he was immortal, and his favorite pupil Hercules shot him with an arrow. He couldn't die from the wound, but he didn't heal from the wound either. So Apollo, the sun god, taught him medicine. So he took his wound and he healed it, and he helped other people. So what this
Wow.
represents is kind of like what you need to heal in yourself and get over and help other people. And this is in the ninth house, which is about long distance travels overseas, something that is foreign, like a foreign culture or a foreign language. It's also about religion and teaching. So you take the foreign religion of the Asatru and you use that to heal yourself, and you can use it to heal others.
Use others. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. What a
And,
trip.
and this is in Taurus, which is associated with the second house, where you have all this brutal stuff going on. So you can form positive relationships through the Asatru religion, and being a leader and a speaker and an advocate for that. So, and another interesting thing too, these green lines, they're called a quincunx. It's kind of a weird, funky aspect. It's a minor aspect. There's a minor aspect and there's major aspects, but this is like the major minor aspect, if you will. So it's 150 degrees. So it's not like symmetrical with a circle. You can't get like 150 out of 360 evenly. You know, there's always going to be a remainder of some number.
Yeah.
But kind of what that means is it's like a tense aspect. It's something that you need to strive for, and you need to kind of ingrain with this energy. And Chiron is the focal point. And you got a sextile here between Pluto and Neptune. So then this is like the spirituality and the spiritual healing. This is about all your past trauma, getting over it and being reborn. And this is kind of the wound itself, kind of like in where your love and relationships and your resources where you lacked. And you kind of need to heal it through spirituality. This formation here is called a yod. A yod it's Hebrew for finger of God. So it's kind of like pointing to where you need to go, something that you can't ignore. So kind of like you need to integrate these two energies, and you kind of need to get over it and kind of integrate it, because these two work kind of well together. They kind of flow well together, but these two energies that are making this aspect down here, that is getting messy. Hold on.
That's crazy too. You could tell like down below here where it's the things that I've been working on in my life and been through in my life. And then you go upwards and it's like the things that are newer and the things that I'm starting to learn and the things that are starting to change in life. Like I'm using my past and things like that, my story to better myself and other people. You know, I'm taking that. It's kind of cool. I see
Yeah.
where you're going with it. I see where it's at. All this stuff right here leads up, and then I see the heavy stuff right here where it's full, and then you can see up top where it's a newer. It's newer for me. It's a new pattern of behaviors.
Absolutely. Yeah. So kind of like healing your wife and healing your relationships. And like you said, that you just don't have time to struggle because Saturn's making you work.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like it's punishing you in a way. Like we give you a wife that you love, and she kind of helped get you out of the substance abuse cycle, that vicious cycle, and helped you become clean. But at the same time, you got to pay that debt back and help her and guide her to the afterlife. You're kind of like a psycho pump yourself. You got to guide her to, like Odin would guide someone to Valhalla, basically.
Yep.
You got to fight that.
And I got to do that in a way that doesn't send me back to where I was using and doing things like that. You know? Yeah, I've got to go through in order to not fall back to getting stuck in old patterns.
So definitely forming a group, forming like an Asatru chapter in Tucson or something like that.
That'd be cool.
Would be a big part of something that you need to do.
Was a shield wall Gothi for a long time, which means I would run the bloats. I would run the ceremonies.
Yeah. So you should try to find time to do that. At least like, even if it's just like once a month or something.
Yeah.
If you can get out, even if it's virtual or whatever. I mean,
that's a good idea. Like a virtual group, and then like maybe get together for like big things like solstice, things like that.
Yeah. Don't they do like sweat lodges and stuff too?
Yeah, I do sweat lodge. I go up to the Pasca Yaqui tribe.
Oh, so it's not an Asatru
so I
thing?
do no. That's just something I do with the Native Americans. But I mean, it's the same. I go up there with them because they have the same kind of belief system. It's nature's law, you know.
Like a pantheistic thing, yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, we're going to talk about the nodes now. So like, this is the north node. Like I said, it's kind of like things that feel unfamiliar to you and things that feel weird and kind of what you need to strive to get and things that are uncomfortable. And this is kind of like what you were in your past life, if you want to think of it that way, kind of where you're coming from, bad, nasty habits that you're in tendencies. So we'll talk about your south node. So there's two different ways to look at it. There's a mean node and there's a true node. So it's right on the cusp of Leo and Cancer. And this is kind of right on the cusp of Capricorn and Aquarius. So the mean node and true node, they're off by like a degree and degree and a half. So one is actually in Cancer and one is actually in Leo. Just from what I know of you, the one where it's in Cancer and Capricorn makes a little bit more sense because your south node is in Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. So this is kind of like a negative thing. This is the house of children. So it could be like when you're a child, it could be the house of indulgences, hedonism, house of excess, the house of it could also be the house of romance, the house of affairs, flings, things like that, like booty calls, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But kind of how I think it pertains to you is like you had this hardship here because you always got to look at the ruler of the south node, and the ruler of the south node is Saturn
again. One of the ones that's keeping me trapped or keeping the good things trapped.
Yeah. So having a hard childhood, having, like I said, like you said, you have a daughter or something somewhere, but you're not allowed to see her. Doesn't like to talk to you.
Oh, I have a grown son. My son's
Bryan,
grown.
okay.
I was only in his life till he was 3, and then I went to prison. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't. His mother remarried. His mother married, and then I was gone so long that Daniel was adopted by Ian, which was her husband, and then she passed away about the time I got out of rehab and got clean and sober and was going to make amends. I was tracking her down so I could talk to her about, making amends and getting in my son's life. And I found out that she had passed away, like while I was in rehab from bile duct cancer.
Shit. Yeah. So hardship in relationships again. So like you just kind of go through this cycle where maybe you get caught up in drugs, you get caught up in the hedonism, you have the hardship of that, the hardship of growing, having a rough childhood, having kids yourself and not being able to see them, being locked away in prison and jail, being caught up with the wrong crowd.
Yep.
So that's like a negative thing that you have to get up.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because the mother of my child was a Cancer.
Really?
I see it up here. Yeah.
And that's like a theme too, like of sickness and illness, and your current wife too is real sick and stuff too. That's an unfortunate but interesting correlation.
Almost, yeah. I got out of one relationship, and then she ended up passing away. It's like I couldn't dodge the fact that I have to experience a loved one going through that.
Yeah.
It's like, I dodged a bullet, and then it's like, here, it's still here. You can't get away. If it's fate, it's fate.
Yeah. So trying to get away from that and like getting caught up with the drugs and the hedonism and all that and that excess. And it's making a dotted line, like a loose trine with that little loose orb of like 10 degrees to your Chiron. So that's a big part of your wound that you need to heal. And it's also going to your midheaven, which we didn't talk much about. And it's making a sextile to your north node and a trine to your south node. So your midheaven, like I said, is one of the angular houses. It's the cusp of the 10th house, which is ruled by Saturn again.
Ruled by
It's
Saturn.
So Saturn's not all bad. It could be
No.
about your career and your goals and your public reputation and working hard and overcoming things. But with the south node, that's like one of the only things we look at as negative, but it's not totally negative. But it can also mean that you're kind of like, you can do the time, like you can take the blows, you can take the punishment and come back from anything. But yeah, it's making that to your midheaven, which is in Gemini, which kind of gives you like this chatty vibe. You like to get to know everybody. You like to talk to everybody. It's again like a natural born speaker, a communicator. That's a shitty line. So like being an advocate, like you could be known as a speaker, like a spokesman, as like a priest or like a higher up or whatever, like the Pope of Asatru. Or I don't know how their clergy works or if they have a clergy system at all.
Yeah, the
But
Gothi. But I mean, it's basically a Gothi. Everybody has a little position, but that can change as well. Like depending on what you agree to. Like you could have somebody be the Gothi, but somebody else could lead a bloat. Doesn't necessarily mean that. I mean, there's no hierarchy. We're all Vikings, you know.
Yeah.
The only thing is before you do, because we say it every time before you do a bloat. If anybody has any bad blood between each other, we deal with it accordingly, like we always have by the Viking law, which means you fucking fight it out and get it over with before you bring that shit in here. You know, if you guys got problems, get rid of this shit, get it over with, figure it out, and then come in here. Don't bring that negativity with you. You know.
Yeah. So yeah, you could definitely be like a religious spiritual leader starting a form of media. This could also be about media. You could start like a YouTube channel or a podcast where you talk about all this stuff and
I
kind of
thought about that. That's cool. Yeah.
And I've done YouTube and stuff before. It can kind of get you. It's a learning curve and you got to learn it. But you know,
Yeah.
I really didn't get anywhere doing it. But my channel has like 560 something subscribers, so it's almost
It's
nothing.
pretty good, man. That's good though. It's just got to start somewhere. But it's like, you know, you got to, it's like, because people want fucking asinine content. They don't like real stuff. Like you got 500, you got almost 600 people that like the content you're putting out. That's huge, man. You know, you don't have to be somebody you're not just to get a bunch of likes, you know?
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. But my biggest thing is just being a little shy, you know?
Yeah.
At first, a bunch of fucking strangers on YouTube, and I'm sitting here and they're all watching me, and I'm like, fuck. I like attention, but not that much.
It's also making a sextile to your Uranus, which is again about like not being able to keep your mouth shut, kind of, and your criminal past and going against the grain. Like you want to be different to the point where it kind of holds you back. And having that angst against authority and kind of stepping on the toes of the bosses where you kind of just got to shut your mouth and smile and kind of grin and bear it, you know, that could kind of be like a downfall of you too. And that bad habit that you kind of need to learn to integrate.
Yep. That, and then of course, going back to oversharing, because sometimes oversharing, even about my past, kicks me in the ass. Oh, well, you know, like, because in the back of the mind, people are like, oh, well, he's a criminal, or, you know, oh, he's a drug addict. And I mean, you can't make people see things sometimes. Yeah, I might have been a drug addict, but I'm not the same person I used to be, you know?
Yeah.
Not everybody gets that.
Change is possible.
Yeah, change is possible. Exactly.
It's optional, but it's possible. Some people don't ever change, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Yep. You have to want to change. That's the problem. Some people don't want to. That's why you got people that are still homeless. You know, you can't force them. You can go on all the outreach calls you want. You can't fucking force somebody to stay clean and sober long enough to get a house, you know?
Yeah.
And even if you did, well, they're just going to fuck it off anyway because they're getting high, you know?
But anyways, going to your north node, kind of like where you need to strive to be kind of blind spots, you need to develop that family. You need to develop that community because the 11th house is about the community. It's called the House of Friends, but that's a conception as well, because the House of Friends is a part of the seventh house, which is
Okay.
Pisces. It's like a group of community. It's kind of like, it could be a group of coworkers. It could be people that you hang out with at the gym, or a gang, or other inmates in prison. It's kind of like loose acquaintances, like people that you know, but you're not buddy with necessarily.
Yeah, people that you run into through your life, things like
Yeah.
that.
And it's conjunct Mars, which again is about kind of finding family. It could be about like through violent, forceful terms, like a gang, or being a part of the mob, or, doing a hit in prison or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But this is something you have to integrate naturally. So this is like, Mars is about taking initiative. It's about setting goals and going for them. It's about expressing like your masculinity and being a go-getter. So kind of like, you need to go out and you need to find your tribe. You need to find the group of people that you so long for, because the North Node is in Cancer and the ruler is the moon. So you need, and Leo is a king of the jungle, king of the zodiac. And it's kind of like, everybody needs to hear you roar and acknowledge you. And that's going to give you emotional fulfillment. So again, like, you're a leader, you have a message to say. You kind of need to find your spiritual family, and that's kind of like where you need to go.
Okay.
And that is actually making a sextile to your midheaven. So these are both kind of working in your favor. Like, you could take these old nasty habits, these old tendencies, and kind of work it to your midheaven, and you can take it and kind of integrate it into where you need to go. So forming a community, a spiritual community, would be beneficial for you, I think. And again, like the ruler of your North Node, it's making this trine, this positive flowing aspect to the planet of spirituality, which is retrograde. That little R right there means that, from our perspective, it's moving reverse in its orbit. And when things go in reverse, like we're in a Mars retrograde right now, which can be kind of a pain in the ass. But it takes the energy inward rather than outward. So you kind of get to find your own spirituality inward and kind of work through your own problems and heal yourself. And that goes to your moon, and you need to be acknowledged and recognized for it. And that goes to Pluto, which you can use the spirituality and the religion to heal yourself. And again, that goes making this little triangle thing there, like this little part of a kite. I think that's pretty much all I got. You got any questions?
That's great. Yeah, that's really cool, man. I need to try to be lean towards the spirituality aspect of my life a little more, maybe,